welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. And last, but certainly not least, if you're interested in extra content on querying and publishing that's only for our members, please consider joining the Literary Prospects Patreon at patreon.com/literary prospects. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Abbi Waxman is the USA Today bestselling author of I Was Told It Would Get Easier, The Bookish Life of Nina Hill, Other People's Houses, and The Garden of Small Beginnings. Her latest novel, One Death at a Time, is out now. Abbi worked in advertising for many years, which is how she says she learned to write fiction, and loves chocolate, dogs, and lying down as much as possible. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband, 3 children, 3 dogs, and 3 cats. Abbi Waxman, thank you so much for being here today to discuss your arresting new novel, One Death at a Time. Publishers Weekly says One Death at a Time is a caffeinated Hollywood whodunit full of fast-talking characters. Kirkus Reviews says it's sharp and clever. First Clue says, the joy of this book is both its breadth and depth. It's a marvelous portrait of 30 years in Hollywood, the conflict between the generations, and how humor can almost conquer all. Author Allison Goodman says, I ugly snorted too many times to count. A fabulous mystery, characters with depth, and a total hoot, too. And author Freya Sampson says, Abbi Waxman has done it again. This book has everything you could want. A cast of funny, flawed, feisty characters, a deliciously irreverent, hilariously high-octane murder mystery plot, and a huge amount of heart. I absolutely loved it. So, with that,
It's so nice to hear all of that in one place. Like, wow. Wow, that book sounds great. Who wrote that? Yeah.
It is great. What can you tell us about One Death at a Time? How do you describe it?
Well, they all did a marvelous job. I mean, I hope that it is very entertaining. I hope that the characters are gluey and that you like them, because I want to keep writing these characters. I hope this becomes a series. And with all my books, my ultimate goal is to just create an experience that is relaxing and entertaining and fun and not too challenging. Like, I'm not interested in writing the great American novel. I'm not interested in challenging people to, ponder life's deep complexities. I'm really interested in being a good companion on the page. And I hope that I've achieved that, and I've always wanted to write a mystery. My mother is a murder mystery writer, so that's what I grew up reading. And that's what I read for pleasure most of the time. And I finally got a chance to do it.
What was the spark that started this one for you, that got it started?
It actually started a really long time ago. So Mason and Man started life, which is what I referred to. All of the books are just Mason and Man in my head. So Mason and Man started as a TV pilot that I wrote over a decade ago. And I wrote it for a friend of mine who was an actress who sadly passed away very young. But I wrote it for her. She was going to be the character of Claudia, who's the housekeeper. And so I wrote it sort of on a lark, and because I like mysteries, as I said. And it got a little bit of traction at NBC. And for a moment there, it looked like we were going to make a show, which would have been really fun. But it went away, which is extremely common. And so I was like, F it. I'm going to be really good and not swear. I swear all the time. F it.
You can swear if you want to.
No, it's okay. It might pop out. It's just Britishness. But fuck it, I'm going to turn it into a novel. And so I turned it into a novel, and then it basically sat in my computer for the subsequent 13, 14 years, because in the meantime, I wrote one more novel that I didn't send anywhere that I wasn't happy with. And then I wrote another novel that became The Garden of Small Beginnings, which was the first one that got published back in
Mm.
2018. And so then my publisher was like, no, we like these rom-coms that you're writing,
Mhm.
and they're doing fine. So more of those. And I was like, yes, but I have a mystery and I really would like to do a mystery. And they're like, that's nice. Keep writing the rom-coms. And so I kept writing the rom-coms. And every time I would submit a book and it would be accepted, I would be like, and can we do the mystery now? And they're like, no. And then luckily for me, Richard Osman's book came out, and then Murders in the Building, and a
Mhm.
couple of other things, right? A couple of other mysteries, and so, Knives Out. And so all of a sudden, mysteries were cool again, and which I don't think they ever weren't. But
Yeah.
publishers are very, very, they're charming, delightful people. Let me say that first up. But it's a little bit like, and this is true of the movie business too, a little bit like high school. So what's cool is what they want to do. So
Mhm.
if somebody has a breakout book like the girl on the train or something like that,
Mhm.
then all of a sudden all they want to do is twisty, flawed female heroine protagonist mysteries.
Mhm. Mhm.
And uh so luckily that my moment arrived, basically, funny, lighthearted mysteries are in vogue. And so they're like, "Oh, do you still have that mystery?" And I'm like, "Do I?" Yes, I do. And so I rewrote it and like because it needed a lot of work and I got a lot of help and because the plotting is not my strong suit. Um I'm good at character, I'm not so good at plot. So I asked for a lot of help and a friend of mine who's a TV writer helped me a lot with the plot and we worked really hard on it and here it is. So it took a very long time to come out and I'm very, very excited that it's coming out. And I hope that people like it. So
What you mentioned that your mother wrote
Mother. Yes,
mysteries.
she did. Yeah.
She a very big influence on you, I'm assuming.
Huge. I mean, it was, and also it was, that's the house was full of mysteries. And so I grew up, that's what I read, like as a child. Agatha Christie, Patricia Wentworth, Dorothy Sayers, like classic golden age mysteries are my jam. And female detectives, Miss Silver, Miss Marple, all of those people. Poirot's fine. And then I got really into Nero Wolfe for a long time, Rex Stout's books. Um, and I still turn to golden age mysteries for comfort and pleasure when I'm in between books or if given the choice of what to read, I will pick a golden age mystery. And uh but yet it was very it's funny, my children talk about this. It's sort of like a recessive gene. It just repeats in each generation.
Mhm.
That I thought that's what mothers did. I thought mothers went into a room, clouds of cigarette smoke would billow out from under the door, and then they would emerge with a book, right? And so growing up with a parent who is a creative professional means that you think that's possible. It doesn't cross your mind to think that that's a difficult thing to do because that's what you see. I think
Mhm.
if I'd grown up in LA, I think I would have been a TV writer because I would have seen that all the time, and I think I would have enjoyed that job. But yeah, so that's what I thought grown-ups did was write books. So, so that's
I
what I did.
love that so much.
Yeah, good. And she's retired now. She's long retired. But she published 15, 16, 17 books in her life. She was pretty successful. She won the Gold Dagger. She won the John Creasy Award. Like she was pretty successful. They made three terrible, two terrible movies. And now they just optioned again. Her first book, which was called A Running Duck in England and Fair Game here, they made Fair Game with Cindy Crawford and they made Cobra with Sylvester Stallone. Two terrible, terrible films. And then she recently got a call because some TV company is optioning it again, and it's the book that just keeps giving. And so I also saw that process of how you
Yeah.
write a book and you put it out into the world, and then it's no longer yours; it belongs to the world, which I believe very strongly. Like once you let go, pardon me, once you let go of the book, it belongs to the readers, and I saw how little control writers have over
Mhm.
what happens to their work, and how much fun it is,
Mhm.
and that you can take a very simple, strong premise from a book and turn it into almost anything, including an axe-wielding motorcycle gang, which was not a feature of the original book at all. Nope, no motorcycles, no axes, no wielding, in fact. So, yeah. So yeah, she was a huge influence on me. And in general, she just worked every day.
Mhm.
And so I just work every day. And my children say the same thing to me. They're like, well, it's really hard being a writer. Like you work every day and you're constantly like, I'm never going to be able to do it. That was my last book. I'm not going to be able to finish this book. My eldest daughter does a not that funny impersonation of my writing process, which is sort of like this, with deep depths of despair and moments of, she's like, some moments you'll be like, I'm fully aligned with the universe. I'm fulfilling my purpose. And the other times you're like, yeah, I'm never going to be able to finish this chapter, let alone the book. So yeah, it is what it is.
What does your process look like from when you're getting, when you get that first idea for a book? How does that go from that idea to the finished draft? And is it different for a mystery versus a rom-com?
Um, yes, although I've only now written two, so
Mm.
ask me again in a
Okay.
few years. But my process is somewhat shambolic, and I always start with the character. I'm always interested in the characters first, and then I basically come up with things that could happen to them. And in terms of the rom-coms, they're not all rom-coms, they're not all romances, my books, but they're all what I call domestic fiction. That what I'm interested in is how women mostly live their lives, how they balance the various things they have to balance. Um, but I've written books that are more romantic and books that are where the main protagonist is already married and it's about how does she juggle,
Mm.
three kids and a carpool and neighbors blowing up.
Mhm.
And uh, it's the minutia of life that really interests me, like the small stuff that
Mhm.
happens that is big stuff, really.
Mhm.
Um, the process, as I said, I'm a pantser, like what they call a
Mhm.
pantser.
Mhm.
Like I make it up as I go along. I have a vague idea of where I'm heading. Sometimes I even know exactly how it's going to end, but I have no idea how I'm going to get there. Um,
Mhm.
So I tend to write in chunks. So I will get very excited and this is going to be the best book I've ever written. This is going to be great. And I like slam out like 10,000 words, somewhere around 10,000 words. And then I completely panic and freak out and have no idea what I'm doing. And so I write what I've got on cards and I stick it on a board and I look at it and I panic some more and then I decide what I'm going to do next and then I write another 10,000 words and then I basically repeat that process until the book is done. So I'm not very good at, I don't understand. I'm jealous, but I don't understand the people who are able to like write detailed outlines, and then go back and write the book.
Mhm.
And interestingly, I had to write an outline for this book that I just turned in, which is the second mystery.
Mhm.
And they decided that there would be an interim deliverable of an outline, the detailed outline, which my agent did, bless her heart, in order to have an interim payment for me. Right? She's like, "Oh, we'll do it. We'll do," because they've changed the way that they pay it. They now pay her over a longer period of time. So she's
Mhm.
like, "Here's here's an idea. Deliver an outline, and then they'll send you a little bit of money, and then the children can have shoes, and you won't starve. It'll be fine." So I'm like, okay, but writing the outline was actually a horrible experience, and I hated every second of it. And once I'd written the outline, I no longer wanted to write the book. And I was like, because for me, what's compelling is what is going to happen next. I've got no idea. Like I have to be
Mhm.
surprised. I have to be curious about what's going to happen next, or I don't, it turns out, have any motivation to actually do the work.
Mhm.
So I wrote the outline, and then I adhered to it for the first little while, and I adhered to it generally, like
Mhm.
that generally, sure, you can see a relationship between the outline and the book, but I basically threw the outline away about a third of the way through and just wrote the book as it came. Um, and definitely mysteries, although I always wanted to write mysteries, I'm now starting to question my life choices because they're really hard and I'm not particularly good at it. And so the plotting of the mystery is very hard and difficult for me and painful. And
Mhm.
so although yes, I hope the book is successful, I hope I get to write them and therefore get better at doing it.
Mhm.
Uh, it's actually been very difficult. With a romantic comedy, if it's a more romantic one, so like Nina Hill is pretty much a straight romance. although it's got family stuff in it. Adult Assembly is essentially a straight romance. Um, you know you want them to get together, so you know that's where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
In the mystery, you know that you want the bad guys to be punished and the good guys to prevail,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to make it very complicated on the way. Otherwise, it's not
Mm-hmm.
interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's very challenging, and I would like to say that I've gotten better and better at writing books, but I absolutely have not. Like it's just as much of a clusterfuck, if you'll pardon the phrase,
Mm-hmm.
now, and this is my eighth book, as it was at the beginning. So yeah, it's not. But again, it's not ice fishing
Yeah.
or like working in a mine. It's not a
Mhm.
difficult, I can wear what I want and
Mhm.
snack continuously.
Mhm.
And so I'm not complaining. I'm very grateful and I love my job, but it's not easy
Yeah.
for me. So
You said you start with character
always, yeah.
first. The characters come first.
Yeah.
How do they come? Do you see someone and wonder about them and then sort of create things in your head? Do they just sort of pop into your head? Do you sit down and start writing and they come out on the page? Where do they
They sort of pop into my head. They sort of I just write people I find interesting. I find most people interesting,
Mhm.
and I like complicated. I think all of us are pretty complicated, and
Mhm.
I like complicated people, and I like people who are problematic, and I like people who are working on themselves
Mhm.
um, as friends. And therefore, I'd always want to write characters who I would like to be friends with or who I can respect.
Mhm.
Sometimes I write characters who I don't like, but they're usually the bad guys or, the really problematic person in the book. But I always struggle, and my agent has said this to me. She's like, you really struggle to write unpleasant people. And I'm like, because I don't want to spend any fucking time with them. Like, I don't want to be in someone's head who's, a racist or a homophobe or uh, selfish, and unimaginative. Like, they're not interesting to me. So I don't want to write those people. There are plenty of writers who excel at writing complicated, unpleasant characters and plenty of readers who love to read about them.
Mhm.
But, I like to stick to my lane, which is people who are generally speaking trying to do the best version of themselves that they can, who struggle with everyday challenges like we all do, who are very, very human, um,
Mhm.
and who fall in love or find themselves with a dead body in a swimming pool, happens all the time, um, and have to deal with it, right? And
Mhm.
have to get on with it. So yeah, so always characters first, and they just kind of come into my head, and then as I start to write them, they just get fuller and fuller and fuller. I, I I have no better explanation than that. And they always have ever since I was a child. So, you know, other people, I hear, disembodied voices all the time, and have a lot of imaginary friends. And I did as a quiet, sort of introverted child,
Mhm.
and I do as a slightly more extroverted middle-aged woman. So it's okay.
When you do have occasion to have to write an unpleasant character,
Huh?
do you have any tricks or tools to get yourself into doing that?
I Yeah, I just think I just try and get a little bit angry and a little bit annoyed and irritated, and then I can write characters who are unpleasant.
Mm.
I find it very hard to not redeem them, or
Mhm.
to at least give them some element of humanity,
Mhm.
because I think, with some notable exceptions, obviously, most people aren't unredeemably evil.
Mm.
Obviously, serial killers, certain politicians, like,
Mhm.
there are people who,
Mhm.
really seems like the evil goes really deep. But generally speaking, I'm hopeful and optimistic about people.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. But yeah, I can do it. I just have to I step out of myself a little bit, and I
Mhm.
worked for many, many years in advertising and as a copywriter, and you learn, and the reason it's such a good training for any writer is that you learn to write in different voices because you're writing for different clients, right? So you have to constantly change voice.
Mhm.
And so I just put myself in the head of a horrible client, and then I just write a horrible client. So yeah, it's a challenge.
I
But
wanted to ask you more about that, actually, about your advertising background and how you say that that's
I'm
such good training
gonna
for
I'm
fiction.
gonna take a sip of water if that's all right,
Go
because
right ahead.
I feel as it came without coffee. Um, yeah, well, advertising is excellent training. I don't know if it still is because I think that it's changed a lot.
Mm,
Sadly, I think that it's much harder for young people to break into advertising these days because so much of it is now social media based, or AI can do a good job of generating a lot of like basic copy. And so I worry for the younger generation that there aren't going to be as many entry level jobs as there used to be.
mhm, mhm,
But I was able to get a job at 21, with my portfolio. And I promised when I moved to New York. So I worked in advertising in London when I graduated from college. A job I got because I had a friend who was an art director, and she got me a job. And then I got fired from that job, um, and moved to New York. And because my mother is American, and so I have dual citizenship, very handy.
mhm, mhm.
And so I moved to New York and managed to persuade an agency, Grey Advertising, to give me an interview because I promised I would wear my new hat if they gave me an interview. So I did. And I had a portfolio of work and they gave me a job. And I knew jack shit about advertising, except what I had learned doing this sort of course. There's a course in England you can do, um, run by the Design and Art Directors Association, which is sort of the awarding body for advertising. And they run a course for young people every like twice a year. And it's hard to get on it. But once you get on it, you basically do a brief every week and you end up with 12 campaigns for your portfolio. I hope they still run it. It was great.
Mm,
Um, so I got my first job, and you learn very quickly that the writer is meaningless. One, two, that everybody thinks they can write. Three, that, and this is important, a good idea doesn't care who had it, right? So if somebody comes up with a good idea, if the account person comes up with a good idea, great, right? So
mhm,
you learn to leave your ego behind completely.
mhm,
You write small things, big things, medium-sized things, and it gets shat all over by the client,
mhm,
first by the account person, then by your boss, then the client. They all rip it apart, and you have to learn to just like shrug that shit off and rewrite it. So
mhm,
it's really a practice in editing and rewriting, and you do a lot of work. Like you just generate a lot of words.
mhm,
Um, to a deadline, under pressure, and when you don't give a rat's ass about the product. Like I worked for on Chase Manhattan Bank, for example,
mhm,
writing those little bill inserts that go in your credit card bill. And
mhm,
writes that. Somebody has to write it. And that's the kind of thing I think that probably AI writes these days, or
mhm,
they just, and so no one's learned, there's not space for a young person to learn how to do it. But um, I'm not scared of AI. I'm not worried about it, but I do worry that it's skimming that sort of entry level stuff.
mhm,
Um, yeah, so you learn to face rejection, you learn to face, constant criticism of your work, and you learn to just leave your ego in the other room and just get on with it. You just have to
mhm.
keep going. So it's excellent training for the endless rejection that comes with being a novelist.
One thing that all of your work has in common, um, and I can tell talking to you right now, is humor. Why do you think humor is important?
I think it's the most important. I think that we have to laugh. If we
Mm,
don't laugh and find humor in the ridiculousness of being human, of being basically a small prey mammal, um, living with a lot of other mammals in a confined space, um, then we would go insane.
mm,
And part of it is also cultural. I think that British people in general, because we're crammed together on a very small island where it rains a lot, have to find the funny side. And finding the funny side is a survival tactic, right?
mhm,
And uh, so it's always where my mind goes. Like whatever happens, I'm always like, this is gonna be funny. Like even terrible things that have happened, um, you can't help but see the moment, step outside the moment a little bit, observe it. I think that's probably a writer's habit. You observe what's happening to you, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a scene one day. This is ridiculous. you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously there are truly tragic things that are not funny at all. Um, and I can certainly, like everyone else, get in a mood where I'm like, I have nothing funny to say about any number of things,
Mm-hmm.
current state of the world, etc. Um, but at the same time, it is awfully funny. I mean, it is just ridiculous, and you have to, yeah, you have to laugh. It's not, I mean, the old phrase is you have to laugh or else you'll cry,
Yeah.
but I think you have to laugh or else you'll die. Like, I think it's
Yeah.
actually more serious than that. I think that we need to laugh. Um, and it's, yeah. And I can't help it. It's the way it comes out when I write. Like when I try and write seriously,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to write something serious. It doesn't come out that way. So it's the way it goes. Yeah.
Are sleuths at the center of One Death at a Time? And now it sounds like they're going on into a series as well. But Julia and Natasha are both recovering alcoholics.
Yeah.
What drew you to exploring recovery in this book?
Well, obviously, because I myself am a sober alcoholic.
Mm.
So I've been sober for 28 years. And it's what's interesting about it is in one way, first of all, I like sober people.
Mm.
I like people who are working on themselves. I said that before. Where people who are able to look at their own side of the street and say, "This is what I'm responsible for. I'm going to take accountability for it, and I'm going to try and do better."
Mm.
Right? That I just admire that as a trait.
Mhm.
And again, like I said, I like to write characters that I like, that I
Yeah.
admire. Um, I think that, uh, and they're not just sober; they're in AA, so they
Mm.
go to meetings, they work on themselves, and alcoholics tend to be quite funny.
Mm.
They tend to have ridiculous stories, right? And have done ridiculous things. So there's just like endless material, having spent, all this time going to meetings all the time. It's like the stories, like, oh my God, like the things that have happened to people. And they talk about it very openly in meetings. And it's just rich. It's just a very rich slice of human experience. And it's such a pleasure and a privilege to listen to people every day talk about challenges that they faced, things that they've overcome, right? And so I wanted to write about that. But I didn't want to write about getting sober or even about being sober. I wanted to just have sober characters.
Mhm.
So they they go to meetings, but I don't write about the meeting. Like I don't really, there's one meeting at the beginning of the book, and
Mm.
then I never will you will never see them in a meeting that much.
Mhm.
It's
Mm.
not about the program. It's not about doing the steps. It's not about that. It's about detectives who have this additional challenge all the
Mhm.
time, which is however shitty things get and however chaotic they get, they can't drink, right? Or
Mhm.
do drugs. They have to stay sober, and they have to make sure that they eat enough, and they have to make sure that they're paying attention to what's their responsibility, right?
Mhm.
And it also is the thing about AA is that you know someone, you might know someone quite intimately. You might know that they've had an addiction to drugs, that they're divorced, that they had affairs, that they embezzled, but you don't actually know anything about their life. And so you don't know where they live. You don't know what they do for a
Mhm.
living. You don't know, you might know or be able to guess that they're married or not married, but you don't know where they grew up. You don't know that much about them, right? And so
Mhm.
that means from a character's point of view, from a writer's point of view, there's this huge pool of characters about whom you can discover things at any point, right?
Mhm.
So you might have a friend called Frank who, you've known in the program for 10 years, and it turns out that Frank can pick a lock, or that Frank can speak French. Or
Mhm.
it's just so there's a constant pool of surprises.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to give myself that cheat.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be characters. There's always going to be stories. Um, and there's always going to be something to do. When you wake up every day, your primary purpose is to stay sober that day. And so these detectives have to solve a crime, but they also have to take care of themselves and make sure that they don't fly off the handle. And when we first meet Julia Mann in the beginning of the book, she's been drinking.
Mhm.
So she's someone who has relapsed on and off many, many times. And I wanted to talk about that because that's a very
Mhm.
common part of recovery is relapse. And so, um, yeah, And, because I think it's interesting.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's why it's a nice point of difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also very much a buddy story
Oh, yeah.
involving these two women, different ages,
Yeah.
very different points in their lives. What drew you to writing a buddy story, and what drew you to these particular women?
Well, I wanted to write an old lady, and I wanted to write a little Gen Zer.
Mm,
I have three Gen Z daughters, and I love that generation, and they're full of piss and vinegar, and they're different. They're quite different.
mm,
And I wanted to write a boomer because boomers get such bad press, and mostly because they're dicks.
mhm,
But she isn't. But and because I think, and also detective duos are a classic form,
mm,
right? So
mhm,
it's they're basically Nero and Archie, like like
mhm,
Nero Wolf, right? You have
mhm,
um a much more sedentary, much more sort of composed brain, and
mhm,
then you have a younger person who does all the running around and ass kicking.
mhm, mhm,
So it's very really modeled after Nero and Archie, who are my favorite detective duo. Um, and because I'm always interested in female friendship. I
mhm,
think that um, not that men and women can't be just as close,
mhm,
but that the sort of structure of female friendship interests me.
mhm,
And they really don't like each other that much at first. Mason likes Man, the young one likes the older one,
mhm,
doesn't really know why because she's kind of rude.
mhm,
And Julia doesn't like Mason, but finds her kind of funny and
mhm,
entertaining.
mhm,
And so they're a little bit prickly with each other at first, and then they develop a grudging admiration and eventually real affection for each other. And I'm hoping, and then their lives ch are very much changed by being friends with each other. Like
mhm,
they're both really strongly impacted by the other. And I'm interested in intergenerational stories in general because I think once we start siloing in our generation, we're screwed. Like
mhm,
you
mhm,
have to pay attention to what young people are doing. You have to remember that older people have experience that you haven't got. And so I think the minute we're like, no, like I'm Gen X, right? So the
mhm,
minute I'm like Gen X is where it's at, which is true. But then I'm screwed. Like you have to be curious about what other people are thinking and feeling and doing. And I wanted that in the books, and also they're just very sparky with each other.
mhm,
Julia's very, very sarcastic, and Natasha and sort of misanthropic,
mhm,
and Natasha is act first, think maybe never. Like she's
mhm,
just much more sort of let's get out there and do it. And Julia's like, wait, like you need to think it through. Like so, it gives me a nice dynamic to play with.
mhm.
Um, and Natasha goads the young one goads the older one all the time, like to do stuff, and so it's good. It works. I like it. So yeah.
It does work. And you and I were talking before we started, and I alluded to it just now, but about the fact that you're looking at this becoming a series,
I hope, yeah.
these characters. Did that come to you when you first started rewriting and working this one to get ready to, after it had been sitting in the drawer, to get ready for publication? Did you know at that point, I want this to be a series,
Yeah.
or did that come to you later?
No, I always wanted it to be a series.
Yeah.
um I want to write these characters forever. I just love
Mhm.
them. I like being in their world, although as I said, the second one was difficult, and halfway through I was like, what am I doing? Like, why did I do this? Like, rom-coms are so much easier, and uh the plotting is so difficult, but I love the characters, and I want that, things are going to change, right?
Mhm.
Their lives are going to change. And because I think I'm interested in general in how people grow and develop and change over time, right?
Mhm.
And so writing a series means I get to revisit these characters. And I do it in all of my previous books. Like characters repeat in my rom-coms as well.
Mhm.
And it's something that I love to do. And So characters from the Garden of Small Beginnings, Lily and Edward, show up in like 3 other books so that you can see, if you care, what happened afterwards. And I write in, time linearly. There's a word for chronologically. Jesus Christ. Chronologically. A writer. With words. I write chronologically. So my books happen one after the other, time-wise, because that's what chronological means. And so if you care to read them in order, not that it matters, they all stand alone, but if you read them in order, the story develops. Even if those characters aren't the main characters, they'll reappear in a scene and you'll find out what's happened to them subsequently. Because as a reader, I love that. I love it when writers have repeat characters. I like series. Like, I love a series. I like to read a series in order. I like to read all of it, you know. And so write what you love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love repeating characters. I love female characters. I love age gaps. I like sobriety. I like detective series. So that's what I'm trying to do. It's just very selfish. I'm just trying to make myself happy. It's okay. There are worse things.
Do you have an earliest memory of writing? Your background obviously is a little different since you said you grew up watching your mom.
Right. Yeah. I always wrote. And my first and sort of very formative but silly memory is that in elementary school, and I was pretty young in elementary school, so we're talking 7, 8,
Mm.
my teacher submitted a poem I had written to a poetry contest and I won. And I went, and it was very small. It was very small beer. It was like I grew up in a town called Bath, which is quite a small city in
Yeah.
England. And the
My husband's
library.
from Bristol, so I know Bath.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. My daughter is at Bristol University right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. I was in Bristol like 2 months ago.
It's great.
It's a great city. It's a fantastic city. Gosh, it's so exciting. Anyway, so I grew up in Bath, and the library ran this contest. So this is very small beer, right?
Mhm.
But I went and to the awards ceremony. I think I got a book token for like £10, which is it's pretty exciting. And I stood, and they made me stand up, and then they read the poem, and I was just enormously excited that other people liked what I had written. And then I was that was it. I was off to the races. I just never really stopped. And then I won a playwriting competition. It's not like I was a show pony. These are the 2 competitions I entered. A playwriting competition that was the whole of the south of England. So much bigger,
Wow.
but still
Mhm.
very, very small, bearing in mind that England is smaller. The only state smaller is Rhode Island. Um, so and again, it was a one-act play competition, and I wrote a play and we performed it with all the other finalists. And I won, and they brought the house lights up, and everybody applauded. And I was 15.
Wow.
And so I was like, this is what I want to do. Not get applause, but write things that people read and like.
Mhm.
It's not that I just wanted to write privately. I wanted to write to be published and to talk to other people, but not personally. I don't actually want to go out and talk to lots of people because I'm quite shy. But I like it when my work goes out, you know. And so I always wrote. And then I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote many, many books that were too shitty to go anywhere. And then eventually I got one published. So, and
Well,
hopefully they'll let me keep doing that. So
I think they're going to let you keep going.
I hope. I hope so. Fingers crossed.
What was the road to publication like for you?
It was it was the usual. It was a mixture of luck and work with a really heavy dose of luck, which I think is almost always the case. So I wrote the book that became Garden of Small Beginnings, and I needed to get an agent. You need to get an agent. I sent it out to 50 different publishing houses, got absolutely no response, not even rejections, just like sound of crickets, right? Nothing. But I had a friend who my ex-husband knew somebody who was an agent and made an introduction, and I sent her my book. And then another friend had an introduction to an agent who he was friends with, and I sent her my book. And so I had 2 agents. And the first agent was really a very, very serious agent, much more serious than I deserved. And she was kind enough to call me and tell me that the book was brilliant, but that she didn't want to represent me, but that she really liked the book and I should continue to write, and that I would doubtless find an agent. She was very encouraging.
Mm.
And then the other agent just took forever to read the book, like months. And then eventually called me up and was like, this is fantastic. I want to represent you. So it was like luck, it's always who you know, right?
Mm.
And it shouldn't be that way. There should be a more egalitarian way of doing it. But 9 times out of 10, you get introduced to somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And
Mm.
so the important thing to do is to always do your best work and show up on time and be a nice, reliable person. And then when someone has someone they can introduce you to, they will.
Mm.
So, yeah. But yeah, I was very lucky. And then in the end, the first agent I had, and I had a difference of opinion and broke apart. And then I got a different agent. But a wonderful agent who I love. Scares the shit out of me, but I love her.
What do you know now that you wish you had known before publishing that first book? 8 books in, you're 8 books in now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that it wasn't going to get easier, so that I could have relaxed about the fact that it wasn't getting easier.
Mm.
Because I think I keep expecting things to get smoother and easier, and they don't. You just get better at it.
Mm.
I can't remember. Some athlete said it's not that running gets easier, you just get faster, right? It's
Mhm.
always a challenge because you're always pushing yourself to a little bit out of your comfort zone. So like writing mysteries, for example, my agent said to me recently, you're the most rebellious writer I have. And I'm like, I don't, one, and two, like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, most writers, when they've hit a vein that works, stick to it.
Mm.
But you're like, no, I want to do this because I just told her that I have a science fiction book that I want to do. And so she's like, and so then you want to write mysteries and you push and push and push. And then now you're like, and I want to write science fiction. And I'm like, I don't know what to say in response to that. It's not rebellion, it's compulsion. Like I can't stop myself from, if I want to write science fiction, I'm going to write science fiction. She doesn't have to do anything about it, but but I'm going to do it. Because although it is a job, it is very much a job, and I have like a contract and people who are expecting work at a certain time, and I try and take it seriously
Mm.
and be diligent, relatively diligent. Not, I'm very lazy, so broadly diligent about it. It is still inspiration, right? It is
Mhm.
still moments of like, I want to tell this crazy story.
Mhm.
Um, so I wish I had known that it was okay, that it was always going to be hard,
Yeah.
and that's all right. It's just a process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite piece of advice for aspiring authors?
Oh, good Lord. You sprung that on me. Wear layers. It's very cold work. Like you need to be warmly dressed because you sit still for a really long time and you're working and you can get really chilled. And so it's important to wear lots of layers and have snacks ready at all times. Like just maintain a steady supply of your favorite snack. So that's my best advice.
I love practical advice.
Wear layers, eat snacks, and don't stop. Never stop. Never, 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 never stop. Just keep working while warmly dressed.
And snacking.
Very important. Low blood sugar is the enemy of creativity.
We have a traditional last question
Okay.
on the podcast, and it is, when One Death at a Time is made into a movie or series,
Yeah.
what
From
do you
your
think?
mouth to God's ear, because
There
that
we
would be
go.
awesome. Yeah.
What do you think the theme song should be?
Oh my God, the theme song. I have absolutely no idea. Um, yeah, I don't even think I can begin to answer that. Um, what a devilish question.
Sorry, Abby.
That's all right. I think that bearing in mind TV being what it is, I think they'll lean on a sort of Hollywood-esque noir type theme song. Like I feel
Yeah.
like that's what they'll go with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
it'll
that's
be
what
a
they'll go with.
mystery. We'll have to see.
I know, and I would love for that to be a question for the in reality because I think it would make a great TV show.
Yes.
And we'll have to hope for the best.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
we will. Abbi Waxman, thank you so much for coming on. It has
my pleasure.
really been a delight talking to you.
It was absolutely my pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.